And we'll welcome to the table Senator Segerblom and his comrades. Go ahead, Senator Segerblom.
Maybe it's the other way around. I'm their comrade. Good morning. Senator Tick Segerblom from District 3. SB180 is what really is a simple bill, and it basically seeks to have the legislature do what we committed to do back in 1980. If you recall, there was a advisory question on the ballot. Then the teachers union got the signatures and required us to consider a room tax. That was passed by this legislature in 2018, when that generates about $180 million a year. But we have since then stolen that money because it was supposed to be supplemental for education. We have put it in the general fund, stolen it ever since, and kind of coincidentally or ironically, the total we've stolen is about $750 million, which of course is something that we're freely going to give to the new professional football team in Las Vegas. But be that as it may, this bill seeks to have us go back and relook at that issue. And if it's $180 million, that's pretty close to the $200 million I've seen thrown around. I don't see it on Nellis, but we've asked for an amendment to include so that equity funding, is that what it's called? The distributive, in Clark County where we're going to transfer the money around, that would be one of the permissible uses for this. So that maybe that amendment, because of the staff, wasn't able to be created, but I've asked for that amendment. But otherwise, basically here to kind of embarrass us all for what we've done to education, even though we promised we would give it. But anyway, any questions? Otherwise, I have two esteemed gentlemen, I guess we could call them, who can explain better.
Any questions of Senator Segerblom? Okay, we'll go ahead. Mr. Murillo, are you next?
Yes. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ruben Murillo, President of the Nevada State Education Association, representing over 40,000 educators statewide. NSEA strongly supports SB 180, the Teach to Achieve and Succeed Act, which would direct IP1 room tax monies to supplement critical education needs like programs for English language learners, special education, STEM, STEAM, education, and literacy programs for the successful implementation of Read by 3. In 2008, NSEA was joined by other stakeholder groups and placed in advisory measures on the Clark and Washoe County ballots to raise the room tax to supplement public education funding. After passage of these measures, the collection of over 130,000 signatures to qualify the initiative petition for the ballot, the legislature adopted IP1 into law, increasing the room tax to supplement public education funding to improve the achievement of students and the payment of salaries to attract and retain qualified teachers and other employees. While it was agreed that these monies were used to help balance the budget in the 2009-2011 biennium to avert the worst budget cuts during the recession, a special fund was created to ensure that these funds would be used to supplement public education funding into the future. Unfortunately, during the 2011, 13, and 15 sessions, the legislature passed legislation to use these funds to supplement general funds for required school funding, citing the lingering effects of the recession. So while IP1 now generates $365 million in the biennium, public education has not seen a single additional cent from this tax. So while the recession finally behind us, IP1 funds must be put to where they were promised, into the classroom. When IP1 was adopted, Nevada ranked near the bottom of states in per pupil spending. And nearly a decade later, we continue to be ranked near the bottom. Now, despite heroic efforts from the governor and the legislature during the last session to raise revenue for public education, we know that these additional funds only backfilled massive education cuts made during the recession. Now, a decade later, Nevada continues to be ranked near the bottom of states in per pupil education funding. The room tax money must be used for what it was initially intended, to supplement public education funding. As we have seen already in numerous hearings on education, more funding must be provided to meet the needs of a growing and vastly diverse student population. The restoration of IP1 monies into the DSA and to supplement, not to supplant funding, will go a long way towards meeting the unmet needs in public education including the funding of special education students, English language learners, and at-risk pupils that have been prioritized for additional funding with the contemplation of weighted funding formula. The economic crisis has passed, but we still have a crisis in our classrooms. It's time to do what's right for our kids by passing SB180 and restoring IP1 tax monies to their original intended use.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Murillo? Senator Keffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Murillo, you indicate the IP1 money is going to generate $365 million over the upcoming biennium, or is that the current biennium? Upcoming biennium. I mean, do you not consider new money that's been put into Zoom schools, Victory schools, Nevada Ready 21, teacher incentives, peer support, and review, professional development, all of those things, additional money that we've put into education over the past couple of years?
Those are very questions.
Ruben Murillo for the record. Yes, absolutely, those are very critical, and those have been used to help address critical needs in our area. However, during the course of this legislative session so far, we've heard of the need of additional funds, for example, the weighted funded formula. The number of $200 million was tossed around last week, and actually I believe the district and other groups are looking for $600 million.
Yeah, the bill's like $1.4 billion.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But I'm talking about what I heard at committees and what we've heard discussing. So if it's $1.3 billion, then somewhere along the way we have to start looking for monies to reach that goal. And in my mind, this money would be a really good start to take a look at the weighted funding formula, which we know that across the state needs to be addressed. And to me, this is a great start in the right direction.
But your testimony was that we had not spent any additional money on education, and that's just not true.
No, if that was, sorry, Ruben Murillo for the record, if that was my, if you took it that way, that was not my intention. I think I mentioned in here that we were very supportive of the governor when the tax revenues were passed last time. That, I do remember reading that in here. And so we recognize that monies have been put into education, but there still needs to be additional funding for example, weighted funding formula.
But this is also just a mechanical issue. This isn't about more money. There's no more money in this bill. This is a mechanical issue of what a budget account we spend it out of, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Daly?
Chair Woodhouse, committee members, thank you for being here bright and early after another late night. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. NSEA has been working for over 100 years to ensure a high-quality public education for every Nevada student. As our President Murillo stated, NSEA supports SB180, Teach to Achieve and Succeed, to provide direction on how to spend IP1 room tax monies to improve student achievement. But I'll tell you, having watched a lot of hearings here over the first 7 weeks of this session, it's clear to me at least that there's no shortage of good ideas about how to improve public education and student achievement. Here in the Senate alone, you have bills on Zoom schools, computer education and technology, special education, financial literacy, school gardens, STEM and STEAM education, school libraries, and of course, the weighted funding formula. All great ideas, all will help public education, all come with a price tag and currently aren't funded. That last one, weighted funding formula, as Senator Keffer pointed out, with a really big price tag. The magic in this hearing really is not in the details of the bill, SB 180. It's in the big picture of public education funding. Senators, there's $365 million out there right now that should be going to improve public education. Given the importance of this issue, I actually put on a tie today. This is my $365 million tie. Comes on when the items go up. But I also think that a little bit of a deeper dive into the history and the genesis of IP1 and these monies, I think, is warranted. I did have a very long phone conversation with our previous president, Lynn Varney, who wanted to be here this morning but actually is sick. But we reviewed the history that she so intimately, and I think some of you here probably remember. Back in 2007, when public education funding was in a desperate situation, NSEA filed a gaming tax measure to raise money for public schools, and we began collecting signatures on that measure. However, before we submitted the signatures that following year, Lynn was approached by Steve and Elaine Wynn. They worked together to put the IP1 framework together and created the Committee for Advancement of Education in Nevada. This coalition included NSEA, Wynn, Harrah's, and Station Casinos. Working with these coalition partners, NSEA went out to collect signatures across Nevada to qualify the framework for IP1 for the ballot. While collecting over 130,000 signatures, we also had advisory measures placed on the Clark and Washoe County ballots. In November of 2008, both of these measures passed overwhelmingly with 66% support in Clark and 57% support in Washoe. As you know, after the collection of the signatures on the statutory measure, the legislature had 40 days to enact the petition into law, otherwise it would have gone to the ballot. Speaking in front of the Assembly at the first hearing on IP1, President Lynn Varney set the tone, and I quote, "The initiative petition will provide a desperately needed dedicated source of revenue for our K-12 public education system. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the problems we face, about the overcrowded classrooms, the educators who can't pay their mortgage or rent, the number of classes that are taught by substitutes because we are unable to recruit qualified permanent teachers. The voters of Nevada have spoken and have done so with a firm and decisive voice. The initiative petition you are considering is before you because over 130,000 Nevadans have demanded you act by signing the petition. They have sent you a message that enough is enough, that it is the time to begin the process of making K-12 public education a priority." End quote. But as we now know, the recession was deep and it lingered on in Nevada for years. Every subsequent session, 2011, 2013, and again in 2015, IP1 monies were used to supplant general fund dollars in the DSA, freeing up an equivalent amount of money to help in other areas of the budget. During these years, NSEA did not give up on education funding. In 2014, we launched the Education Initiative to enact a margins tax on businesses with revenues over $1 million. I can hear my colleagues covering their ears right now because we don't like to talk too much about TEI in public anymore because of that brutal result, in the end. However, I feel it's important to point out that during the campaign, the most salient argument against TEI was that Nevada, only a few years earlier, had passed a room tax for public education, and the legislature took that money away from our schools. They went on. How can we trust that the legislature wouldn't just take the monies from a business tax to fund other priorities or their pet projects? And honestly, we had no good response to this critique in that campaign, which brings me to today in the 2017 session. When it comes to funding education, Nevada has been running in place. Through the chair to Senator Kekeffer, you're correct. There have been a lot of efforts to put funds into the public education system, but we have to keep in mind there were drastic cuts to public education like all other public services during the recession. Nevada has been running in place. The commerce tax that we reference, it basically got public education back to pre-recession levels. So while, as President Murillo pointed out, I think we ranked 49th in per pupil public education funding in 2007, I think we might have moved up a spot or two. But we still rank near the bottom of states in per pupil funding for schools. This year, even with targeted additions to important education programs like Zoom and Victory Schools, special education, we know that total education funding only goes up about $150 per pupil in the governor's proposed budget. That doesn't even keep up with the increasing costs of doing business, not to mention all of the other programs that we want to try and fund to improve our schools. Public education in Nevada needs a new infusion of cash. Unfortunately, there's no other way around it. So there's no doubt that the $365 million generated by the IP1 room tax should be used for what was initially intended, what the voters approved, to fund our schools. We know how to improve our schools and ensure that every kid has a quality education. We have no shortage of good ideas, but it always comes down to a question of resources, which is really a question of political will. With this existing law, passed in 2009, amended every 2 years, but sunsetted at the end of the biennium, if we do nothing, this is the beauty of this one. If we do nothing, if a majority of this committee decides not to redirect these monies back into the general fund, these monies will be available for public education. We ask that you strongly consider doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Mr.
Madam Chair, if I could just throw out another idea. I can appreciate the fact that this is a lot of money and maybe we couldn't swallow it all in one bite, but maybe the committee could even look about a 10% a year or something, maybe a future projection of trying to get these money to where we had promised they would go. But
Thank you very much. Okay, we will take other testimony in support of Senate Bill 180 here in Carson City. We've got 3 chairs. Feel free to come forward. And in Southern Nevada, there's a couple of chairs there, so we invite you to come forward. Okay, we'll go ahead and start here in Carson City. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Natha Anderson, and I am the president of the Washoe Education Association, the teachers group in Washoe County. And I'm here in support of SB 180. I wanted to thank Senator Segerblom for resurrecting the discussion around the IP1 money from the 2009 session. I usually don't read my testimony. I just come off the top of my head because it's pretty emotional. But this time I did some research and read the 90 or so pages from that, from the minutes of the Ways and Means Committee that actually was looking at the education budget from 2009. It was February 19th to be exact, 60 or 70 or 80 pages. And as I was reading it, there were 2 things that came across to me. First, oh my gosh, thank God for the people over there that have to type up those minutes. I don't know how you guys can handle it, but wow. But the second thing was, as I was reading what President Lynn Warney said, what Leanne Morris, the 2009 Teacher of the Year, said, as well as David Brooks, who was an ESP from Clark County, the same issues still exist, the exact same issues. We continue to worry about salaries. We continue to worry about attracting and retaining the best educators, especially in the fields of math, technology, and science. The importance of helping our lower grades, K through 3, when it comes to reading, so that way they can be stronger later, both in education, but more importantly in life. The professional development around technology, around differential instruction, around classroom management is always being asked for by our new teachers and the seasoned professionals like myself who've been teaching for 20 years. We continue to need that help. And our class size continues to grow. In Washoe, I'm sure some of you have heard, it looks like we're supposed to have an average of 2 more students per class. What that really means in some classes is 6 or 7. We continue to have the same issue. In the words of Ms. Morris, schools are expected to achieve higher standards and meet greater expectations than ever before. And it continues. And we continue to step up, not because of a law, not because of a budget, but because of the people who we get a chance to work with every day, our kids, because that's who we are working for. But we also need some help. I feel like the education supplemental votes, the funding that was voted upon in 2009, approved by the voters, has not been utilized the way it was envisioned and the way it was promised. And we understood as educators what was happening, but it's getting better. It's time now to use the money as it was originally envisioned and also voted upon, both by the voters as well as by the legislature. Since 2009, there's been an emphasis on improving how we teach math, science, technology, special ed, and ELL, with good reason. We're finally aware of the diverse needs of our students, not only aware of it as educators, but also aware of it as policymakers. And that emphasis is important, yet the funding does not always go, with the exception of very directed programs, which are very much appreciated. But we need more help. And the IP1 money in particular with this bill, if it was used the way it should be, we would be getting some more of that help. I think it's just time that we use the money exactly as the voters asked for and as the legislature approved in 2009. I ask for your support of SB 180. Thank you.